Moshe Tarragon for the OU All Parsha video series from Gush Etzion for Parshas Ekev. The first three Parshios of Devarim can be very confusing because there are a lot of fragments about Har Sinai, about the Egel, about the Meraglim, about the warriors of Eretz Yisrael, and it's important just to organize them before we focus in on an important part of Parshas Ekev. Devarim more or less is Moshe Rabbeinu on the doorstep of Eretz Yisrael, encouraging the Jewish people to enter Eretz Yisrael, Alei Reish, Alu Urshu, and looking back retrospectively at all the events of the past 40 years that had either advanced the entry into Eretz Yisrael or had halted the entry or detoured the entry into Eretz Yisrael. So it's all focused around being on the doorstep of entering Eretz Yisrael and not being allowed in. Parshas Veschanan is very, very personal. Moshe Rabbeinu davens, and his davening is rejected. And because of that, he looks back at all the messages he would like them to live by that he won't be able to deliver to them, and his fears get the better of him, but his fears about Avodah Zarah, the prediction that down the line we'll worship Avodah Zarah, and it's really centered around Har Sinai, that Moshe Rabbeinu felt very personally, that he was the intermediary, that he stayed with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the mountain. He's so covetous of entering Eretz Yisrael that he starts to try to taste some of the mitzvahs of Eretz Yisrael. Of course, he can't taste any of the mitzvahs of Eretz Yisrael except for Ir Miklat. So, despite the fact that the Ir Miklats won't become operative till he enters Eretz Yisrael, he already designates 3 Ir Miklats. So everything is about Moshe Rabbeinu and Gambias Anaf Hashem, looking back at the Egel, and then Hashem was angry at me as well. So, a lot of it is centered around Moshe Rabbeinu's frustration. He's a human being by not entering Eretz Yisrael. Ekev is, of course, a covenant. Ekev is the bris. It's one of the brisim with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ekev tishmoon es mishpatim eilu. You'll merit the land, and if you don't, then you'll be evicted from the land. Really, the bris of Ekev ends in the end of Paraches. If you don't follow Hashem's mitzvahs, kein tov edun Ekev lo tishmoon b'kol Hashem Elokechem. People don't realize that the first part of Ekev is bracketed by 2 Ekevs. Ekev tishmoon, Ekev lo tishmoon b'kol Hashem. Now, what's the difference between the bris of Ekev and the bris of Kitavo and the bris really of Kriya Shema, the second parsha of Haim Shema Tishmoon Mitzvosai? That's a shir unto itself. There seems to be 3 different ways to articulate a bris with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One is the bris of Kisavo, one is the bris of Ekev, and one is the bris of Haim Shema Tishmoon Mitzvosai. And it all centers around Eretz Yisrael and our rights to Eretz Yisrael, and if we follow Hashem's commandments, we'll live in Eretz Yisrael, and if not, we'll be evicted. So those are the 3. Devarim is entering Eretz Yisrael, how to capture Eretz Yisrael, the halts and the pauses about our journey to Eretz Yisrael. Veschanan is centered on Moshe's experiences, Moshe's frustrations, Har Sinai, which looms very powerfully in Moshe Rabbeinu's past experiences, and Ekev is more of a covenant surrounding Eretz Yisrael. Ekev tishmon, Ekev lo tishmon. And Moshe's fears in Parshas Ekev center around 3 different issues. One is you'll forget about the Midbar, you'll forget about the Nisim, you'll forget Vayancha v'Arivecha, Vayichelcha Zaman, Shalayadum v'Ladun Masecha. So he's trying to remind them of the struggles of the desert, of the Nisim of the desert, so they don't become too landed and too comfortable, not financially comfortable, but just as time fades and as the generations roll on, they just won't remember. If they don't remember, they'll forget about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So one is very, not innocuous, but very natural. The second fear that Moshe Rabbeinu has is cultural. They'll be exposed to the foreign cultures, the foreign paganistic cultures. They'll be exposed to the possibility of marrying foreign wives. That's the second general concern of Moshe Rabbeinu's. The third concern is, of course, the wealth, and the wealth that will breed complacency, but also the wealth that will lead to arrogance and self-attribution, and the famous phrase, probably one of the most famous phrases of Parshas Ekev, that you will say, V'marta bilvavcha, kochi v'otzem yadi, asali as a chayil hazeh. That my own strength and my own power led to this success. I'm smiling because I'm remembering, it's 2025 now, so this goes back 42 years. I was an American, landed in this Israeli yeshiva, very much part of the American culture, didn't really know better, hadn't been to Israel that much. And what was my natural go-to place? I got a Sports Illustrated from my parents, mailed to me every, week or so. I got it a month later, but I treasured it like gold, and I would read it cover to cover as I was holding on to my American culture. And in those days, I believe maybe I'm wrong. I believe Mike Tyson was already a champion boxer. May have been someone early, maybe Ernie Holmes, I forget the name, but so the Sports Illustrated came. There was a really big picture of this prize fighter on the cover. So I cut out the picture and hung it on my door, just like any adolescent boy. You'd hang a poster on your door. And the next day, my Israeli, not roommates, but I lived in a little bungalow area with a lot of Israelis sharing the passageway. So they put up a large poster, Kochi, V'amarta, B'vavcha, Kochi, V'otzem Yadi, Atzlis L'chayil Azeh, followed by Lo V'chayav, Lo B'koach, Hashem, Kim Beruchi. So I was coming from Sports Illustrated, and the other Israelis in my dorm were quoting psukim from Tanakh left and right, and I realized I had a lot to catch up. I was still stuck in Sports Illustrated land, and my Israeli, not roommates, but neighbors, were in a different place. But I want to talk about something totally different, not that poster, but talk about a different story that I remember much more faintly, because it happened, I don't know, close to 55 years ago, not 43 years ago. But I remember deep in the back recesses of my memory, in the aftermath of the Six-Day War. Now, I was a 1-year-old Six-Day War, but I heard stories about the Six-Day War, and I heard that a Rav said, he told me again in the 70s, that had there not been parades singing the praises of the Chayalim, Kol HaKavod Latzal, Mashiach would have come after 1967. But because we attributed the success to our soldiers, rather than attributing it to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and we had a parade celebrating soldiers, that delayed Mashiach, that short-circuited the Messianic arc that was compelling and was present in 1967. Now, as an adolescent, not really knowing much ideology, it bothered me. I didn't really know why it bothered me. And it's something which stuck with me. And now that I'm here in Israel, and Baruch Hashem, quite a few people in my family are part of the army, several. And again, it's a chance for people in America to realize the war is still continuing. America, Chutz La'aretz, England, South Africa, Australia. And people are still carrying the war on their shoulders, families, wives, children, grandchildren, grandparents. And of course, not to mention the people who lost or whose children were severely injured. So just keep in mind that this is not something that's just headlines and Netanyahu's decision and the cabinet's decision, but has real ramifications for the minority of the people who are carrying this great mitzvah on their shoulders. Anyway, and I'm part of the army culture, and I attend my son's ceremonies, and there are awards handed out, and my son does take pride. And there's a culture of when I was talking to my nephew over Shabbos, and he was telling me about carrying the Ekev gun, which is a heavy gun. It could be 40 kilos, carrying it from place to place. So, and you ask yourself, well, why isn't that statement made by that Rav 50 years ago or 55 years ago correct? Isn't it true? Isn't celebrating the achievements of soldiers a violation of Moshe's warning, Ve'amarta bilvavcha, kochi v'otzem yadi, asali esachayil azeh? Shouldn't everything be attributed to Hashem? And any time we attribute any success, certainly military success, to our soldiers, we're violating kochi v'otzem yadi, asali esachayil azeh. Now again, whether that did or didn't deter Mashiach, that's a whole different question. People who think they know Hashem's will, and they play God, and they know exactly what's happening in the broader messianic calculus. But forget the larger, what's what I'm looking for? Forget the conclusion that it deterred Mashiach. Put that on the side. Wasn't this a violation of Kochi v'otzem yadi asali esachayil azeh? So to better understand this, let's take a few steps back and define what emunah is, what bitachon is, and what ishtadlus is. So first of all, people often confuse the word emunah with the word bitachon. I have emunah, I have bitachon. Now again, in conversation and in informal discussions, it's fine, but for the purposes of this year, emunah, as this is based on the Ramban, emunah is not relating to a particular moment or decision. Emunah is a general attitude that the world isn't random, the world isn't arbitrary, Hashem created the world, Hashem supervises the world, there's cause and effect, there's reason, there's ration, there's purpose, there's direction, there's providence. And that's steady, that doesn't change. We believe that every event that happens has a purpose. We don't always understand the purpose, but this is a philosophical or theological conversation. Emunah is a theological belief that stands at the foundation of the Jewish belief system. Now, the Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's managing of this world. Bitachon is a very episodic moment. You are facing a crisis, and you have to decide how to respond to that crisis. And in particular, a crisis in which you have an opportunity to rely completely upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or an opportunity to blend reliance upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu with human effort and human installment. And how do you respond to a particular moment that challenges you? So, for example, this is as old as time. Person who's ill, should you consult doctors, or should you pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's like Maram Sachin, that Chizkiah banished the book of remedies because he wanted people to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and were the Chachamim approving of that? Were they not approving of that? When you're sick, should you seek medical attention, or should you daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The Rambam, of course, believes you should seek medical attention. The Ramban, interestingly enough, believes that ideally you should not, but we're not at that level. So whenever you face a challenge, should you rely solely upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha, or should you try to solve and manage and address the issue through human effort? That's the question of bitachon, and bitachon changes from person to person, from situation to situation. How much bitachon should I have? How much hishtadlus should accompany that bitachon? It has nothing to do with emunah. You still believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is managing the situation, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is directing the situation. Bitachon is, should I rely upon the Rebbeinu Shalom exclusively, or should I bring some of my own hishtadlus to the situation, to the dilemma? And of course, the paradigm for the balance between bitachon and hishtadlus is none other than Yaakov Avinu in Parshas Vayishlach, who, because of all sorts of reasons, doesn't feel that he has the right to solely rely upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to solely rely upon bitachon, and he takes various practical steps, not only tefillah, splitting the machana, delivering gifts to Esav, trying to pacify him. Why is Yaakov not willing to rely solely upon bitachon? Well, first of all, Chazal don't want us to, without getting into the weeds and the details, ein samchen al hanes, so they don't want us to just rely solely upon bitachon. They want us to blend bitachon and hishtadlus. In Yaakov's case, he reminds us there are a range of other factors, mitigating factors. Katanti mikala chasadim, he's already dipped into the well too much, he's received too many nisim from Hashem. Chazal talk about Shem Yigua Mached, he was afraid that maybe the sin of being outside of Eretz Yisrael, of ignoring Kibbut Avayim, many reasons that can convince us in a particular moment not to rely solely upon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to put all our chips on bitachon, but to blend bitachon with hishtadlus, and that's why we go to work, we earn a living, we seek medical attention, we try to solve our problems as best as we can with human faculties, knowing that our emunah never wavers, that whatever we try, it's only a partial solution, and we combine bitachon and hishtadlus to try to achieve whatever goals we seek when facing a dilemma. So that's the background, and that's the way most people in today's world conduct themselves. Whether your blend of bitachon and hishtadlus is more tilted towards hishtadlus, more tilted towards bitachon, but very few people today sit and wait for solutions to just descend from Shemayim, primarily not because we don't believe it in theory, because we're not at that level today, and also even if we were at that level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to rely solely upon him. That's why he equips us with tools, with skills, with capacity, and with ability. So that's the general background of hishtadlus. Now, when it comes to fighting a war, the military situation, that hishtadlus bitachon balance slightly changes. Of course, it's still there. And again, Moshe Rabbeinu is not referring to war here. He's referring to material success. So keep in mind, Moshe Rabbeinu is not warning us not to say kochav v'otzem yadi about a military victory. He's warning us not to attribute wealth and comfort and financial success to our own prowess. He's not talking about war. But if we do move towards war, obviously that still applies. Look at Shoftim Perek Zayin, where Gideon gathers an army of 32,000 soldiers, and ultimately Hashem whittles that army down to 300. And 300 people obviously is not an army capable of succeeding on their own. And whether it's Avram Avinu's success in the war with the 4 kings and the 5 kings. So certainly HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to still apply the hishtadlus bitachon balance in war, not to rely solely upon hishtadlus. And certainly the concept, the spirit of not exclaiming kochi v'otzem yadi asa is a chayil. As I remember, chayil for us means war, but in Tanakh, chayil doesn't mean war. Eshes chayil, she means a woman of great valor, great strength, great capacity. So kochi v'otzem yadi asa is a chayil said does not refer to war. Look at Parshas Ekev, it refers to material success. However, the spirit of not becoming engrossed or infatuated with kochi v'otzem yadi applies not just to financial success, but to war as well. However, and here's the point. There's a medrash in Yalkut Shimoni in Tehillim, what number Taf Shin Chaf Daled, in which David HaMelech is being feted and celebrated. It's a parade. Kol hakavod leDavid HaMelech, kol hakavod leDavid ben Yishai, for defeating Goliath. And David HaMelech looks at Hashem and he says, I'm David HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ata otzem melchama, l'chaho nitzachon. It has nothing to do with me. Why are they making a parade about me? So David HaMelech is taking the initial stance of that Rebbe of mine who said that any parade or any, not just a parade, but a culture that hands out awards, that celebrates accomplishments, magazines, I mean, it's a whole culture. Any award is a violation of kochi v'otzem yadi asaliyas achaya laseh. But the Medrash continues, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu leDavid nasata li nitzachon. You're attributing the victory to me. Afani nosein lecha hanitzachon. I'm attributing the victory to shali v'shalcha hu hanitzachon. Something to that effect. I don't have the Yalkut Shimoni in front of me. So evidently with war, the scales change a little bit. When fighting war, the balance between ishtadlus and between bitachon and the ability to self-attribute is a little bit different than in Parshas Ekev regarding financial success and the accumulation of wealth. And the question is why? The Medrash doesn't tell us why. My Rebbe would quote this Medrash to us. My Rebbe Rav Amital spoke very often in the wake of the 67 Six-Day War, in the wake of the Yom Kippur War, not just about trying to revive sunken spirits after the defeat of 73, but trying to put war into perspective from a spiritual religious standpoint. And I feel like I've tried to do that. I'm trying to do that over the last 2-3 years in particular, try to help people see army and fighting and military battles in the prophetic Tanakh spiritual context, not just headlines and strategic and social and geopolitical context. But Rav Amital, though, didn't discuss why. He didn't tell us why, regarding military battle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to attribute success to our own efforts. Why is that true? And the answer is as follows. To fight a war, you don't just need weapons, not just pressing a button, although we're getting closer to that. Fighting a war is a culture, fighting a war is an attitude, fighting a war is ego, fighting a war, you have to believe in yourself, especially when we're fighting a war against so many innumerable odds, and it has been true. Ki atem hamat mikol amim. It's been true of all of our wars we fought, where there are ways to compensate, there are ways we equalize through technology, through commitment, through patriotism. But for a soldier to get on a plane, and for a pilot, and fly in the middle of a foreign country, thousands of kilometers away, knowing that he could be shot down, God forbid, chas v'shalom, taken hostage, chas v'shalom, or for people to work in secret intel, or for soldiers to enter their tanks and enter foreign territory where there are mines and bombs. You have to have trust in yourself, trust in your talents, pride, confidence, ego to a degree. That's why soldiers from 18 to 25 make the best soldiers, because that's the time that young men feel strong about themselves and feel empowered and feel they can conquer the world. And to generate all those feelings and that mentality, which is absolutely necessary, you need a culture. You need a culture of awards, you need a culture of parades, you need a culture of anthems, you need a culture of flags, you need a culture of whatever. I'm not an army colonel, but an entire culture to build that ego, that pride, that commitment. And without that mentality and without that mental space, without that attitude, it's like you don't have a gun. You can't just pick up a gun and shoot. You have to have training and belief and camaraderie and pride and commitment. And there's so many emotions of self-belief and self-attribution that are necessary, and just as necessary as a gun or a tank. And without them, the army effort won't work. So to say it differently, in order for this blend of ishtadlus and bitachon to develop in a military setting, and we believe that this blend of ishtadlus and bitachon is crucial in any area, financial, medical, whatever, chiduchim, you always want to be mishtadel. So to be mishtadel, financially, all you have to do is work hard at being a doctor, lawyer, accountant, financial consultant, investment. To be mishtadel in refuah, all you have to do is get in a car and go to a doctor. You don't need the same mental attitude. Obviously, to earn a living, you need training, you need information. But to be a soldier, you don't just need training in the same way that a doctor would need training or an investment banker would need training in order to execute their level of ishtadlus. You need to have pride and self-attribution, or else you won't have an army. You can't just fight by holding a safer in one hand and reading a Tosfos and shooting off into the air. You have to be able to navigate and prosecute the war with deep, deep belief in yourself. So when Hashem tells David HaMelech, Shali v'shalcha shalanu hu al nitzachon, he's essentially telling David HaMelech, continue with that parade. This parade is not a violation of kochi v'otzem yadi asal esachai alazeh. It does not encroach upon the boundary of bitachon versus ishtadlus. It's still within the domain of ishtadlus. In order for you to be mishtadel, to be a soldier, you have to believe that the victory is based on your efforts. As long as afterwards you say, based on the efforts, and Hashem gave me this capacity, and Hashem enabled us, and Hashem framed it, and Hashem created miracles that I wouldn't have realized on my own. Again, you still have to fall back and revert to Bitachon, so that the Shtadlus Bitachon blend is still within the overall purview of Emunah. But marching for David HaMelech, way back when he defeated Goliath, and celebrating David HaMelech was not a violation of Kochi V'yosem Yadi, and it certainly didn't deter Mashiach. And so it was then, and so it is today. Celebrating Chayalim, Kol HaKavod LaTzahal, giving awards, celebrating their bravery, celebrating their patriotism, celebrating their efforts is not a violation. And not just because we split our mind in two, we say, well, we'll celebrate, but we don't really mean it. It's just to give them a little bit of pride and just to go through the motions. No, those motions and celebrating Tzahal is enabling Hishtadlus. And without their Hishtadlus, we're Samech Halanes. So just like no one would say we shouldn't maintain an army and we shouldn't pick up guns and tanks and missiles, and we need to. So it's not just the weaponry, it's also the inner attitude and the inner mentality. And by bolstering that mentality, by celebrating our soldiers, we're supporting the Shtadlus, which is then blended with Bitachon. It's a crucial point, and I hope that some people have thought of the problem before you're not thinking of the problem. You're not thinking either about either side of the Shtadlus Bitachon hybrid, but within an army setting, to be mishtadel means to self-attribute, as long as the self-attribution also allows room for recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us those skills, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu also is Hashem Ishmael Chama, Hashem Shema.